Of all the lenses through which the world has been viewed, the bottom of a glass has never been considered the clearest. But it turns out through the bottom of a glass may be a perfectly good way of looking at the world. In fact, according to a new book, it may be one of the better ways, because whatever was in the glass may have well determined what was going on in the world around it.
People are used to dividing history up into the Stone Age and the Bronze Age and things like that. And I'm saying, forget all of that. Let's have the Beer Age and the Wine Age and so forth.
In fact, Tom Standage's book, A History of the World in 6 Glasses, talks of history flowing through 6 distinct liquid ages. The age of beer.
People naturally assumed it was a gift from the gods.
Wine.
Wine is the drink of kings and the king of drinks.
Coffee.
Suddenly they had an alternative drink that instead of dulling the mind, actually made the mind sharper.
Tea.
An alien arriving on Earth at the height of the British Empire would look at what was going on and say, my goodness, it's all caused by tea.
Spirits.
Rum in particular just encapsulate the first great era of globalization.
King-size Coke has more for you, get value.
And Coca-Cola.
Yes, okay, it is a drink in a bottle, but it has all of these other meanings, the liquid essence of America. Right, close your eyes, everybody.
Standage's take on history is more of an eye-opener. Its point is that the drinks didn't just accompany history, they often shaped it. Beer, you may be surprised to learn, helped build the pyramids.
The people who built the pyramids were paid 4 loaves of bread and 8 pints of beer a day. That was their wages.
So it wasn't slave construction that built them.
People thought for a long time that the pyramids were actually built by slaves, but the records of their payments were found in a nearby village.
The happy accident of stored grain getting wet and fermenting can be traced back 4,000 years to Mesopotamia, where they drank it, this ancient pottery relief shows, from communal urns, through straws, to avoid the gunk on the surface.
Okay. Cheers.
When we clink glasses today, we hark back to those communal drinking times. And that's not all that stayed with us.
Writing was made necessary because you had to keep track of what beer and bread you were giving to people. So you can argue that beer is the drink from which Western civilization emerged.
And if beer was part of the beginnings of civilization, wine helped to spread it.
Look how sophisticated we are, said the Greeks. In our culture, even the slaves can drink wine. And of course, then what happened is you had to start distinguishing between very, very fine wines and not so great wines. But
it may, I mean, to give it a break, it may have had something to do with the drink. It's a pretty good drink.
It is, but it was scarce, it was hard to make, and there was great potential for connoisseurship, all these rituals that go along with it.
Not just the snob appeal traveled with wine as it was traded, mostly by the Phoenicians, around the Mediterranean.
One of the things the Phoenicians spread around the Mediterranean while they were doing this was their notion of the alphabet, which is one of the ancestors of our modern alphabet today.
Culture, writing, and etiquette in a bottle.
The ideal was that you drank enough wine that you had freedom of tongue and you could make witty remarks. So Aristophanes says, quick, bring me a beaker of wine so I may wet my mind and say something witty. But you didn't want to go too far and become incoherent and fall on the floor.
In fact, falling on the floor was a common problem that another drink fixed. Out of the sands of Arabia came a beverage that hit Europe like a cold shower: coffee.
This is the first coffee house in London. It opened in 1652, and at this point coffee was an absolutely radical drink because it was not alcoholic. And so up to this point people had been drinking alcohol at breakfast time, at lunchtime, in the evening, and suddenly they had an alternative drink that instead of dulling the mind actually made the mind sharper.
Round about 1700, the buzz of caffeine cascaded through the European bloodstream, and the coffee house became the boardroom that drove revolutions in science, business, and politics.
There were information exchanges like websites are today. So scientists would go to one and discuss new theories and sometimes even do experiments and have scientific lectures. Business people would go to other coffee houses. So Lloyd's of London, the insurer, started in a coffee house called Lloyd's.
It wasn't all sobriety, of course, and one drink, distilled spirits, particularly rum, lubricated the commercial wheels of the most notorious trade in history, the slave trade. Sugar grown in the West Indies was shipped to New England to be made into rum, which was then shipped to Africa to pay for slaves, who were shipped to the West Indies to grow more sugar.
Rum was the currency that was driving the Atlantic economy at that point. So you have what's sometimes called the triangular trade, and so rum is the drink that embodies this first period of globalization.
But if you're looking for a drink that determined the shape of the modern world, look here.
This is the Cutty Sark. So this is one of the clippers, the great ships that were used to bring tea back from China all the way around the world, amazingly quickly.
The British unquenchable thirst for tea didn't just drive their empire building in the East, it helped cause revolution in the West, when the British made the historic mistake of trying to dump excess product on their American colonies.
The plan was you ship the tea off to America, you sell it at a knockdown price to the colonists, and you hide the tax in the price. And that way, they pay the tax without realizing it, and you've established their right to be taxed.
Or not. The colonists famously had other ideas, which made the world safe for Coca-Cola. What began as a kind of snake oil concoction with, yes, a trace of cocaine in it, evolved to become the worldwide face of America.
This happened essentially as a result of the Second World War. The head of the Coca-Cola Company, when America entered the war after Pearl Harbor, said that wherever American servicemen went, they would be guaranteed Coca-Cola at 5 cents, the same price they paid at home.
The so-called Coca-Cola colonels set up bottling plants wherever the GIs went.
And after the war, the bottling plants stayed put, and as a result, Coca-Cola established itself all over the world.
And it developed some unlikely fans.
So General Zhukov, and he was the leader of the Russian army that had liberated Berlin. It's said that Eisenhower introduced him to Coca-Cola, but of course he could never be seen to be drinking this sort of classic American symbol. So he asked if he could have a special version of it made without the colouring, and it would look a little bit more like vodka.
Which, for a Russian general, was socially and politically a lot more correct. It's a lot to swallow, this drinking in history business, leading to one last question. After all of this exhaustive research, where do you come down on the drinks?
Oh, that's very straightforward. Coffee in the morning, beer in the evening, wine at the weekends.
Simple, really. Cheers.